Steve Gillmor. This is the Gillmor Gang. It's Friday. Okay, that's about it for my enthusiasm. Except, of course, that the thing I've been waiting for and living for all these years just happened, and that is the invention of Office on the iPad. So we'll talk about that, I'm sure. And now that I've told you what this show's about, let's tell you who's on. Okay, starting on my extreme right, his extreme left, is Kevin Marks. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi there. So that's stage left, is it? So I'm not interested in that at all because I don't use the iPad or Office, so that's completely irrelevant to me.
Well, that'll be part of the mix. Okay. Secondly is Danny Sullivan. Welcome, Danny. It's been a while.
Thanks. Good to be here. I don't care about Office, but I'll have thoughts.
That's not true. I saw you tweeting madly about it.
I was tweeting. I'll have thoughts. I think it's good for Office people, but we can talk more.
Okay. Especially Robert Scoble. Welcome, Robert.
Hey, how you doing? Just got back from the Dent conference where I met with one of the 6 guys who developed Office, which was sort of funny.
The DET conference?
Dent. Make a dent in the universe. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Is that what that means?
Yeah.
And where's that?
Up in Sun Valley, Idaho. It's beautiful.
See, I thought there was somebody named Dent that was associated with it.
No. It was after the Steve Jobs quote, which is go out and dent the universe.
All right. And then hopefully we're going to get... yeah, that guy. John Taschek. Welcome, John. And say hi to Comcast for me. Okay. Comcast cares. They better care. Okay. So who wants to start? Scoble, what do you think about this Office for iPad?
Yeah. That's about my only comment. I'm with the rest of you. I don't use Office very much anymore. And the iPad I do use, unlike Kevin. But it looks good. I just am not... I'm not in the market anymore for what they're offering.
Okay, that's it, huh?
Yeah.
I mean,
For me, it's sort of like too late, perhaps. I'm pondering in my mind that the interesting thing in all this is probably not, wow, Office has come to the iPad, but that Microsoft's cloud services are coming to the iPad. Because I've been using, Google Docs for ages, and if I want to do a spreadsheet or something, I've been using Google Docs as my main spreadsheet. I don't do a lot of it on the iPad, and if I were doing a lot of dedicated work, I might go to it. But I do the stuff on Google Docs, and what's more important, it means that I don't have to worry about where the file is because the file is still out there for me when I'm on the desktop and everything else. Whereas my mindset with Office in the past, and I had been a long-time Office user, really had been very file-oriented. I've got this spreadsheet. Oh, I need to put the spreadsheet on a thumb drive. Oh, I need to email the spreadsheet to somebody. It's always been about the using the software to interact with the data, which didn't reside with Microsoft itself. So what struck me the most when I fired up the Office Excel app yesterday was that, it wasn't like I was using Excel, and it was nice, and I felt like just a quick look that the Excel application was better than the Google Docs spreadsheet application. But what I was really struck by was that this was putting my data with Microsoft's cloud. That suddenly I was being tied into the Microsoft cloud in the way that I never had been before when I deal with Excel. To this date, if I fire up Excel, I fire up Excel and it's because I want to do some heavy spreadsheet work, and that file is not something I've thrown out onto the cloud. As opposed to Google Docs, if I ever have to have something I want to share with other people, my first port of call then tends to be, oh, I'll go to a Google Docs document and kind of go with it from there. So that was an interesting change for me in pondering all this, but we'll see. I also kind of was bemused that Microsoft Office, which for a long time had included Microsoft Outlook, apparently Outlook doesn't get to be dealt with. And as somebody who had to give up on Outlook as a Mac user because they were just so woefully poor in dealing with synchronization and all sorts of other issues, that was it. That kind of cut my ties with Microsoft software about a year ago, and it wasn't like I'm upset with them or anything. It was just like there was no longer a strong purpose for me to use those particular suites or products in a lot of ways.
So, Kevin Marks, you don't care at all. So, give us some perspective on the rest of the market.
Well, my sense is that the Office's sort of hegemony over all ways of doing things has been slipping for a while, and it slipped in line with the Microsoft Windows market share. That's they ran on Mac, but the displacement of most computing by phones and tablets has made them much less relevant, and to some extent it's the rise of the web, and to some extent it's the rise of apps. But either way, they're sort of they're sort of marginalized and pushed into the corner a bit. And this obviously they needed to ship it on iPad. But I suspect, they're going to need to ship it on Android and iPhone as well. And I haven't seen any sign of that, if they're going to actually, cover the market that people are actually using.
John Taschek, are you with us?
I'm with you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, kind of.
Well, it's amazing. Verizon works way better than Comcast, especially today.
Oh, excellent. If you could pan down just a slight amount, so that you're...
Well, it's on a...
perfect.
I'd have to hold it there. But,
well, we don't want that. Okay, so we'll live with it. We just won't use the super. So what's your take on Office for the iPad?
Well, I immediately downloaded it and immediately saw that it's kind of a loss leader for them to get people into SkyDrive because of the way it works. It doesn't work with anything that anyone else uses as far as like saving documents, as far as I can tell so far. And it's still hooked onto an Office 365 subscription, so it's still got the anchor behind it that will probably be okay. I'd say there's a couple things. One is, Surface isn't working out so well for their Office strategy. The iPad, a lot of people are going to use it, but it's just the wrong paradigm, the wrong method for doing these kinds of documents on this kind of device. And I think no one has really invented the newest one yet.
Has anybody on this call used Quip?
Yep.
Robert?
I barely. I have it, but I don't use it very often.
So you don't really do document production, Robert?
Not on a regular basis. If I do, it's a blog, and I'm out on WordPress. Mm-hmm. I did use Office or Word for developing the book, but now that I'm not writing a book again, it's gone.
Do you have an Office 365 prescription?
I did a year ago when I was writing the book with Shell Israel.
So you still have it, or
somewhere, but I haven't
expire?
used it in 9 months.
It auto renews, I think, if you hook it up that way through PayPal or something. Because I do have a prescription for Office 365, and it just renewed. So that means I've had it for a year, and I've probably used 20% of the features 20% of the time. I don't know. It's still a good program on a big computer.
To be honest, this thing's not aimed at us. It's aimed at the people who are still on Office, which is a huge amount of people around the world inside enterprises. But it's
I agree.
But these are people who are slow adopters. That I wonder what percentage of them got an iPad and got a Office app. I
Well,
don't know.
I think everyone's got an iPad or some form factor like it.
Not
And I think
everybody.
this is
I watch people travel, and there's a lot of people with old Dell machines who don't have modern equipment and don't care to stay up to date.
but they're doing both. They're carrying like an old. There are new Dell machines also,
There's
but
some
there's an
people who
old
have
old Dell
newer
machine
equipment and
and
or
iPad.
a Windows machine and an iPad, but there's a lot of people who just take what their boss gives them, and that's really who this is aimed at. Keeping those people from switching, and probably this was in time to keep the real bulk of the market from switching to something else. But for me, I'm gone. I'm not coming back to Microsoft. At least not in its current iteration. So, for me, I'm really struggling to have anything smart to say about this, other than kudos on them for saving the last 90% of their market, probably.
You agree, John?
Kudos, yeah, I think it's good. I mean, it doesn't. It's not like they can flip a switch and then turn Office into an iPad app. They had to be working on this for a long time, and so the fact that they couldn't get it right with the fonts and things like that is kind of weird. But I think it's fine. It's good. It's like it's a little bit better than Smart Office maybe.
Well, I found it to be on the iPad. Now, granted, I don't have an Office 365 prescription, as I like to call it. And in other words, it's like, all the drugs that I take these days, it just keeps me alive. It doesn't get me high. How about that? Yes, seriously. Danny, any comments?
It's like I said. I think the real interesting play to me here was really that it put you into their cloud. It'll be interesting to see. Kudos to them that when I looked last night, Microsoft had 1, 2, 3, 4 of the top. They were 1 through 4 of the top free iPad apps that were out there. A lot of people
right. Word is number 5.
Although free in the sense that as soon as you download it, then you have to sign in with your Microsoft account, which validates whether or not you have a subscription to it, and you didn't get it for $9.99. If I understand it right, you can read stuff that's sent to you, but you can't edit or save or do anything with it unless you buy a copy of it or whatever.
Yeah, it's like a PDF reader basically at this point.
And then you can only save into SkyDrive, right? Is that or locally? You can't save to other.
I think
services?
You can only save to SkyDrive, but that's like I said, like with Google, and I can't remember, one of you guys had just mentioned this too. Like you couldn't save it into other places or whatever. You don't save your Google Doc. I mean, you can save and download your Google Docs, but the default thing that you do with Google Docs from the beginning that we've had them has been they reside on the cloud. And so, again, this shift for me with Office has been it's not that Microsoft has put Office on a new platform as part of its Office Everywhere approach, because Office will be coming to Android as well, is that Office has actually been put into the cloud.
Why do you think it will come to Android?
Because they said it would come to Android. If I've seen a number of headlines that have said that, and they've said that these things will come to all platforms as well. So, and that fits in with the whole thing that you didn't download. The news isn't that Office for the iPad is available. The news is Office for the cloud is available. If that makes sense. And you're going to be able to more and more be able to access Office for the cloud through your iPad, through the desktop, like you've already been able to do, via your web browser, or going using dedicated software applications if you want to as well. Eventually, I suppose you'll be able to do it. It does get me though how they talk about you have Office for the Surface, because one of the things that I remember when I was working with my Surface that really annoyed me was, if I recall correctly, the Office apps kept kicking me into the desktop rather than being the the Metro versions of it or whatever, and then it was supposed to come with either a copy of Outlook or a copy of Office, and it didn't actually come with it the way that I thought in the end. That's why I ended up buying my subscription to 365. I couldn't hassle with trying to figure out which version of Office I supposedly had at this point.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Have
it's
they,
just
one
I
of the
give
reasons
up.
that
I give
Office
up.
was
Just
successful
$99 a year. I don't have to hassle with this anymore. Fine.
Yeah, but the new hassle was the same old hassle before Office was a suite, was taking data in one application and moving it to another. I think they're in that same problem again. Like how do you share the data from one app to another, whether it's an Excel table into a Word table, the things that made enterprise people happy.
Right.
The biggest problem I think that Microsoft faces with this release is that a month from now, maybe 2 months at the most, it's going to make absolutely no dent in anything except maybe their stock price. But in terms of revenue, it's going to be I think their total addressable revenue is something like $1 billion that they expect.
Don't you think that if you reconstructed their plan, doesn't it seem like they would like to have one, family account, which is an Office account, which they pay the full fee, $100 a year for family, say, or small business, forever, and then strung off of that, you can have as many devices you want, and that preserves the family plans, so to speak, so that you can string off as many people as you want on the Office versions, and then sell the other one.
Right, but all that really does is it puts the lion's share of their product off of Windows and onto iOS, and then
the majority
Android.
of editions, yes, the deployments, but not the majority of revenue, and that's okay for Microsoft, because it stops the hemorrhaging from people looking to go to other applications.
But I think somebody said that about what are the choices? What are the other applications?
Yeah, well, and so they had time. They had the 3 years. There was no rush for them. I mean, there's Smart Office, and there's that one that Google bought, and then there's some of the new ones that are coming out. But Google Apps hasn't improved rapidly enough for common use. So it's as far as as Robert would say, the beautification of the application.
You disagree?
I would
disagree with that. I'd say they work well. I mean, the problem you have with Office is that you've got legacy documents that people have laid out in a certain way, and they're almost impossible to change because Office has changed its UI so much you can't work out what they did in the first place.
So did the Druids. I mean, they had great documents, but you move on.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But if you're actually creating new documents, Google is fine. You don't run into those issues. The issues with Microsoft Office are being sort of kept trapped by it because it had these file formats, and they're the only ones with the code who can make sense of them. And the problem
isn't that ironic, though? Because, I mean, they were sued so many times that they opened up Office to a common format, and they can't even get it right themselves.
Well, they've got OOXML, which is like a rat's nest of representing all the legacy versions of Office, and it has big blobs of binary cruft in there from different versions and all kinds of nonsense in there. So it's not really a file format anyone would actually want to use. And Microsoft themselves have trouble opening those files sometimes. When you go and save an Office document, you've got like 15 choices of which Office version you want to save it in, so that other people can see it. So it's like a snarl of like dead code and old formats that people are stuck with. So if you're writing a new document, there's no reason to sort of get into that morass, and it's only the ones that people are still editing and updating that keep people stuck in Office. Possibly with Excel is not quite as horrible a file format, but it's still fairly horrible. And again, there are even more tangledness in that, trying to sort of take an Excel spreadsheet and put it to something else, because it's like programming written by people who don't know how to program most of the time. You never know quite what the spreadsheet is going to do when you export it and re-import it, because different bits and pieces will appear and disappear. So that's problematic too.
Well, the
And
formulas
there's
and
a lot of
functions don't
legs
always
in it.
carry over.
Yeah.
Danny, you were
The
disagreeing with
formatting.
the idea that the Google Docs hasn't
Well, I
been
was
improved.
saying for common use, I actually think that for common use, if you define common use as I don't have really sophisticated things that I need to get done, Google Docs is great, right? I need to do a quick spreadsheet. I need to do a quick thing. I wish I could just get my kids who their schools still require them to use Word to write things just to use Google Docs because they don't need any fancy formatting. It's all there. And then I, as a parent, don't have to install all this software and, oh, is it updated and all this other crap and junk that's in there, right? So for common use, for what typical people may have and just lightweight things, I think Google Docs works really well. And I think it'll continue to grow as that kind of a service. And I can't recall if Office Online lets you just do those sorts of things online for simple tasks for free or not. And the fact that I can't recall goes to the degree that I don't even think about going to Office Online for that sort of stuff. But I agree that for people who have sophisticated things, if I were going to be trying to write a book galley, I don't think I'd want to be trying to do that in Google Docs. People do, but I might prefer to be doing it in Word. And, when I personally have some heavy spreadsheeting that I need to do, it's Excel. I'm going to go into it and I'm going to use that. Although I can say, for our own publication, we have a very sophisticated Google Docs spreadsheet that's been built up over time that we have to share among different people, and we've kind of built into that. So I think the challenge for Microsoft is, yes, you do have this audience that does want these tools for their more sophisticated things that are out there, and I don't think they're going to suddenly have a huge crisis where all those people go away, and bringing Office to the iPad helps that audience, plus potentially allows a new audience to come in who want to use this stuff for lightweight things. But I think there's much more competition that's out there, and I think Google Docs is good in many ways, and the Google's been smart about getting that stuff out there.
Well, especially about sharing and collaboration. There's nothing really better than that. As far as when you're working on one document and you have to work collaboratively on that. The beautification thing is more around if you saw the two things together, Office and all the ribbon bars and things that you can't, no one can figure out anyway, versus Google. There's something that is more attractive about Office, and Google has never done anything to make it look better. It's just been kind of adding things into kind of the engineering side. But that said, you're right. If you're talking about common being, hey, I just want to spin something up and get something done, it definitely why it's so much easier to go to a Google Doc. It's just schools are using our kids' schools use it. The parents use it because they don't want to be emailing these files around. They just want to work in the document itself. They also want to see who changed what, and that's an important thing.
Well, that brings up a really interesting point about schools. I'm hearing a lot of the schools are going to Chromebooks because you can get a Chromebook for like $250, and because it has nothing on it that's installable, it's far more reliable for school teachers and the administration of those units. Is this going to lead to a Chromebook version of Office? Because if they lose those kids, and the kids go in the workforce, they're going to go, hey, why aren't you all using Google Docs instead of Microsoft Office?
Yeah, I see a lot of people with Chromebooks in the school.
You can use Office online. I mean, there's an online version that operates. I just so and obviously you can do that through Chromebooks. It's just so you're not necessarily going to lose them, just because people have gone to Chromebooks. But the default when you go into a Chromebook is, surprise, here's your docs, right? Here's your spreadsheet. I mean, the pre-installed app on a Chromebook will be all the Google applications. And so, Microsoft has to struggle on how you do that.
That's what I use Windows as a big machine, and I installed the Google apps on the Windows store, and they come up as Google apps. I mean, it looks like an app to me.
Yeah. They are. I mean, and then in terms of you start talking operating system, you know, it is nice with the Chromebook that you do not just don't have to worry about this stuff. It updates itself, and over the years, it has become much more sophisticated to where, you know, I feel I can do more things on a Chromebook that I couldn't do before. It still has issues. There are still cases where I would, not find that necessarily I could plug in some device that I would need to or some peripheral. It can be awkward using a app-based screenshotting tool, and I'm always trying to look around for the stuff. But if I had to use it for a week and that was the only thing that I used, I would get much more proficient with it. In the same way that, when I had to use, I took a Surface, and, my first reaction with the Surface, and in particular, I'm talking about dealing with the Windows, whatever we want to call it, what are we, Windows 8, the modern UI, or the Metro UI, or the Tile UI, but, my inclination was to run back to the desktop. And when I actually just sat there and said, no, I'm going to see how I can use this new interface, after about a day or so, I got much more used to it. I figured out what the workarounds were, and and there were actually things that I did like about it that you thought, this is actually really nice. So it'd be interesting to see if Microsoft's starting to back away from it as they go along. So.
Well, and you're right. It's like Windows 3.0. When it first came out, people were using CC Mail. They were using DOS and whatever crap was out there. Of course, Lotus 123, or maybe they were using FrameMaker or something like that. It took a long time, so they got used to that. But when they went to Windows 3.0, after figuring out that Alt F4 meant close a window, because not everyone had a mouse, it worked out okay. I mean, it was a new thing. But people were much more quick to adopt an iPad, and the iPad has changed that kind of the way people are used to the touch screen and what's accessible very quickly, and putting Office, the old paradigm, back on to that is not working out yet, because no one wants to touch their Office. It's not the right form.
I think the biggest problem Microsoft has is what Robert said from the beginning, which is he just doesn't really do this very much anymore. The amount of computing time associated with documents, and in particular these 3 documents, is almost a rounding error compared to, he called out WordPress, but Twitter, Facebook. Facebook owns what percentage of your time online, Robert? Maybe 70%? Are you muted? Robert, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I've muted myself so you wouldn't hear me typing. It's a lot. I don't know if it's 70%, but it's it's all day long. The problem is if you're inside corporations, we're using things like Yammer and Chatter and Podio, and I just saw Stuart Butterfield's new thing yesterday, which is doing the same thing, and that's where we're writing to each other online now. I don't open Microsoft Word anymore and type a letter out. There's plenty of people who still do so, but that use case has moved somewhere else for me, and I'm not going back.
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting is that opening it up to the iPad is a good signal for Microsoft, because they've been told to do this for years and they refused to do it. OneNote, they refused for 10 years, 15 years to release a freely redistributable player. They've done so now, but if you go to the website and look at it, the same one that you download Word and the Office stuff from, it says it's free for now, or something to that effect. Currently free. What does that mean? And of course it isn't free, because you have to have a Microsoft account in order to be able to actually log into it.
Yeah.
Which I discovered that there is no available way of getting a Microsoft account except paying for Office 365. So it's like this elaborate, endless loop that you're in, where they're trying to get you into what John Taschek suggests is the end game here, which is $100 a year, and we don't care what you use. It just doesn't strike me as being transformational for their major problem, which is that nobody cares about this object type anymore. They care about it if they're doing a spreadsheet. They care about it if they're doing a book. They care about it if they're... That's about it.
Well, it's transformational, again, if you've transformed people from buying your software to deal with files that reside on their desktops to buying into your cloud. And by buying into your cloud, not necessarily even spending to be part of your cloud, just that you're storing your data up into your cloud. Because if I can store my data in your cloud, then I'm more inclined to store my email in your cloud, or my photos in your cloud, or use your devices that link into your cloud better, or that give you data so that if you want to do what Google does, you can better target me. That the more I've got in your cloud, the more connected I am with you. And these days it's all about building up the connections rather than it is building up the one-time revenue stream. Microsoft's old connection model was we connected with you by buying, Microsoft's old connection model was consumers connected with them by buying software once a year. And then hopefully they reconnected every year by paying for the subscription, or paying for the upgrade, right? And that was a great model when people bought software. But now that we're in a different model where people are less inclined to buy it because there's a different connection model, which Google especially has pioneered, which is you connect with us, we'll give you lots of cool things for free, and we're going to show you a bunch of ads. Microsoft has to change, and transform their connection model. And that's what we continue to see with the iPad, that this is the continued change of that model. You don't necessarily have to pay for it. Yeah, you're getting it for free, but you're probably going to pay for the subscription, right? They really, they're in this weird thing, right, where they have moved people away from the idea that you buy the software and you own it to now you should subscribe to the software.
Yeah, that's...
That was huge. That was a huge shift.
The thing that they haven't done is they haven't really exploited a real freemium model. What they should do, and I hate to make recommendations to Microsoft, but what they should do is to give it away, period. Because it's basically what they're doing is marketing the document object. They're trying to say you all have to go back to this. If you're, to Robert's point, if you're in school, you need to prepare for the real world. If you're in your job, you already have it, but increasingly you can, on the airplane, you have to put away your laptop on takeoff and landing. You don't have to put away the iPad. So you're already in this new world. Why don't you adopt it? Why they're going for $1 billion in revenue when their entire model is under stress, I don't understand it. Taschek?
Am I on? Because $1 billion in revenue represents positive revenue, and it also represents the stoppage of negative revenue, so they can hold on to the model. And as Danny said, it's really about getting people into the cloud. So once they have SkyDrive connected to all the applications and all the documents are there, then they can start building up infrastructure around it with their platform.
But if Danny's right, and he is, then why are they putting a dongle on getting into the cloud? Why don't they just get them into the cloud, period?
Because no one likes SkyDrive.
But, I'd like it a lot more if the 20 gigabytes was free, but it's not. I mean, how do you think that Gmail got traction? It got traction because it was free. And then once you were in there, then they...
I don't know. Isn't SkyDrive free? I don't know. I buy Windows so that I get a bunch of storage with it.
That's what I'm trying to... So I've been trying to figure it out on Twitter right now, and, it's... th-
They made it confusing for sure.
It's
That's
really
a big
really
problem.
confusing, and this is part of Microsoft's like, oh my God, could you have more names, right? So it was SkyDrive, which had these Office applications, and if you go to Excel Online, I'm trying to think of the URL, but I think it's like it's so annoying. It's office.live.com, okay? Because live is left over back when everything was live.
Yeah.
I just want to cry. So then you go over there and you'll see, if you go to that URL at office.live.com, you'll see that there are things like Excel Online, OneNote Online, Word Online. There's this whole thing that's collaborate with Office Online, except that it's not Office Online. It's really OneDrive Online, which was SkyDrive Online. And then if you go into one of these, you actually start you can create a workbook that looks just like you're using the Excel software. It's beautiful. And as you say, it's been there. I remember using this like 2 years ago and starting to play with it. And that all does look to be free. But people don't necessarily know that it's out there, right? And there's all these confusing names and there's all these confusing strategies. And that's why I come back to saying that they're still going through this transformation of getting you to be online. And then interestingly, you could even argue that they've kind of screwed it up with the iPad rollout in that they are letting you just do this as a read-only thing, but they haven't turned in these documents so that you can create for free using your iPad in the same way that you could create for free shareable documents online if you were at your desktop. And if they did allow that sort of thing, then maybe people would be even more inclined to use it. It's a mess. It's a mess, but hopefully Satya will sort them all out.
Why do you say that? Hopefully,
because they've got good stuff there. It's just like they've got lots of good stuff. I mean, the Excel Online, you can put Excel Online up against Google spreadsheets, and it looks so much nicer. It's like format as a table, do a survey, number formats, all the ribbon bar stuff that you want, that you're used to like in a regular Excel, is all there. And Google spreadsheets still feels very rudimentary, or you're having to dig around to do the things that you can't quite get, if you're used to using Excel. So, and that's sad. I mean, why wouldn't you want? I love Excel. Okay, I mean, I love Excel. There's nothing I can't find that I want to put into a spreadsheet.
but
I mean,
do you want to do it on a tablet? Is that?
No. Let me just back up. I want to go back and say like I play Clash of Clans, and I have an Excel spreadsheet to tell me like how much my troops are going to earn in elixir and all this stuff. And there's nothing I don't want to put into a spreadsheet. And I started off with Lotus 1, 2, 3, and when Excel came along, I was like, oh, I don't know how to play with that. And once I used it, it was like I was done, and I was locked into that software. And it should be continuing to take us on into the 21st century. It really should have been the software that you're going to want to use online just as much as you're going to want to use with the software itself. It should have, and they've done that, and they built this, beautiful interface through the web browser that you could use. And I don't think people really know that it exists, and that if people want to share documents or whatever, they go off to Google. And that's a misstep by Microsoft. That's something that they're going to have to do a lot of catching up with. That's why it's sad.
Okay. Well, I think that it's beyond Satya trying to figure it out. I think I think the biggest problem that Microsoft's had for many, many years is that you just basically knew that they weren't going to do what everybody else was empowered to do as a result of the web and now with apps. They're just not going to go there. There's always this little catch. And as you all have just pointed out, not only is there a little catch this time, but it's incomprehensible. Trying to figure out what the catch used to be with Microsoft used to be, an hour of work. I've been looking at this now for a day and a half. I still can't figure out how they truly see. I mean, is it really just about an Office 365 subscription? If it is, why don't they make some case for it other than the fact that that's the only way that you can use the iPad? It just turns the iPad into a dongle, which is really, really stupid.
Well, no, I mean it's giving you an iPad-based application to create this kind of content.
But how many times have I heard from Taschek and others that you don't want to use this kind of you don't want to use Excel on a tablet
Well, some people do.
as a replacement, as something that they can move.
Some people do, and when the iPad came out with the new iPad, if I remember correctly, Apple itself did this. They spent a huge amount of time on all their productivity apps that they were rolling out, like to a yawning degree, right? So clearly, the people want to do things for business uses, and that's been. As people are using that continues to be one of the frustrating things with the iPad for me, is that as I've grown and used it for more and more things, there's still some things you're like, I don't want to learn how to try to do that, or I don't want to try to figure out the solution to it, and I don't have to. Last summer, I was off in Britain for 2 weeks, and I was astounded at how much I could get done on that iPad, although primarily because I was going to the web browser and doing a lot of different things. And if I really wanted to, I probably could throw on the keyboard and start doing the blog posts and doing the screenshotting and making all that stuff happen. I could do that if I really wanted to, but it's still clunky in a lot of ways. But there are other people who are like, they're closer to, this is an all-in-one device for me. I don't need to have the computer. But there are times when I want to go a bit further than what it's allowing. So I don't think Microsoft is wrong in creating applications of its popular software to run on.
I didn't say they're wrong.
Platform.
I just think that they're charging. They're trying to put the cart before the horse. They're trying to get you into the platform by charging you for something. I mean, I sit here and I think, do I really want to spend $100 on this? I see on 9 to 5 Mac or whatever the site is that you can go to Amazon and you can get it for $67. So it's 30% less for why I don't know why I want it. I mean, you have to get them into the theater and watching the movie before you start selling them the popcorn. I don't understand why they're not doing that. I don't know why I should do this. I mean, I can, John, if you had a choice between paying $100 a year for Evernote and $100 a year for Office, which would you do? You're muted.
Is that better? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, clearly, I pay $100 a year for both, and I get a lot more value out of Evernote.
Okay. So, but if you had to make a choice,
I would do Evernote because you can do. Evernote is about saving your things in your life, and Office is not about that at all. and I think most people want to save things that are valuable to them rather than try to use some archaic software to create something that might be valuable later.
Okay, Robert Scoble, if you had to spend, what do you spend $100 a year on?
Spends $300 a month on a phone on your wireless, right?
No, that's not a good question. Just like
Netflix, a couple bucks a month, right?
Okay, so if you had to choose between Netflix and an Office 365 subscription, which would you do?
I don't use Office. I already said that, so I'm not paying for it.
Okay, so
I've lived 7 years of my life without Microsoft except for the book. And I only needed Word for that.
I know, but you're talking about you're Mr. The representative from the state of normal people. What is your recommendation for them? $100 on Evernote, or Netflix, or Office?
It depends who they are. If they want to be up to date, there's a whole lot of choices out there now.
Like what?
They don't need to be in Microsoft Word, Microsoft Office, with the sole exception of Excel. PowerPoint is way better on the Mac, on Keynote, and you can use a bunch of different services like Prezi and Haiku Deck and on the web, which are better in a lot of ways.
You can
maybe
say
not
that,
compatible,
but
and that's
but
the
I
problem. Is If
All
you're an
I can
old
tell you-
style enterprise and everybody
get to
around
you,
you
Dan.
is using PowerPoint, and all the files up on the SharePoint server are still PowerPoint, you're living where I was, 8 years ago when I worked at Microsoft. I don't live in that world anymore, and I don't want to go back.
Okay, Danny, you were
Well, I
suggesting
was going
that
to say with PowerPoint, I mean, you know, we run conferences. PowerPoint is our standard. Most people do stuff in PowerPoint. It's a rare person who's like, oh my God, I have to have Prezi or whatever that goes on there. Most conferences that I go to want things that are done in PowerPoint. So
I've spoken 50 times. I've never used PowerPoint.
I know, but that's
Nobody
you,
gives me
Robert.
shit anymore. You walk in. This morning I
know
was
you can-
speaking
I
at
can-
Macworld,
I
which
know
is a
you
Mac
can-
conference, but you walk in
I-
with your Mac, you plug in, and you go. It works every single time.
I'm not saying that.
These are all just excuses. There are people in the world who are stuck in the old world, are in the past,
I'm
and
not
they are
saying
happy
that-
there.
I'm not saying that
gonna
it doesn't-
rip them out of
Not
the past.
saying that it doesn't work.
But
I'm
there's
saying,
new things that you can use that are
my
better.
God, I could use new. I'm not saying that it doesn't work, and I'm also not saying that people who use PowerPoint are stuck in the past. PowerPoint is an excellent product for making making presentations.
It's
and lots of
substandard
people-
for making presentations, actually.
Not for lots of people who make presentations and do perfectly good jobs.
And
with them.
they
I've
are
seen
substandard.
They're not substandard. It's a slide. Oh my God, your slide.
No,
is substandard.
PowerPoint doesn't
Let's
give
get
you
this other thing.
font type handling to make really beautiful presentations. It's a substandard tool, and I wish people would just nail it that way.
Because you know what? The problem isn't that PowerPoint is a substandard tool. The most presentations are substandard.
which
Okay.
would you pay more $100 for?
Well, no, I mean,
this
I-
argument or Office 365?
Well, but that goes to the broader issue that Office 365 is confusing because is it that you have to pay $100 a year for it? Or wait, if I have Microsoft University, do I get to sign in with that sort of thing? Because I'm reading their thing here and it's like, well, Office 365 Home or 360 Premium or mid-size Biz Office, or then it's like, you want to scream at them and say, for heck's sake, why can't you just come up with one price? I can't, we kind of do this for a living. We're supposed to look at this, and I'm trying to look at their page and figure out. I'm looking at the page right now that says choose the office that you want. Okay, this is like I want to use Office, and here's their page that tells you choose the office you want. Compare all the products that they have. Okay, 3 columns. Office 365.
They've got to give resellers some hope.
No, it's like Office 365 Home Premium, which is $9.99 per month, which is supposedly ideal for a family, which you can do the math, that's $120. So I thought I was supposed to get Office 365 that was $100. But wait, I could get Office 365 University, which is for students, which is $80 for 4 years. Or wait, I can get Office Online, which doesn't even have a price listed at all, which is, as it turns out, is free, right? If you just want to do it with web browser. And now I'm kind of wondering, if I just fire up my web browser on the iPad, can't I just go to Office Online and just do all that stuff there for free and perhaps even better than using the application? So there's a lot of mess that they have, and they've been doing a lot of cleaning up, but they've got so much
Here's
more
another way
cleaning
to
up.
look at it, Danny. I just had dinner with the vice president at Telstra, Australia's biggest phone company. They have 15 million customers, only 200,000 of which are using a Microsoft product to live their lives. So if you're a Microsoft customer, that's great. You're one of those 200,000 people now. But the market share has totally disappeared on Microsoft. And that's why they needed to do this iPad version, because the customers are moving off of Microsoft platforms onto Apple or Android platforms, and we're not going back. And so they're desperate to hold on to the revenue streams of these people who are in the past and who like to stay in the past and don't want to consider going to Google or Box.net or something else, right? There are probably 8 out of every 10 people are like this. They just don't want to change because they don't care. They're using tools their boss gave to them, and they don't. My argument that Prezi or something else is better than PowerPoint is totally lost on those people. They're not watching the Gillmor Gang. So I'd rather move to something more interesting to talk about, which is like Facebook buying Oculus Rift, because that's what our audience cares about. I can't see many people in the Gillmor Gang audience really caring too much.
Well, we'll see. Do I hear a second Oculus Rift vote?
Yeah, I think that's more interesting to talk about for a bit. Sure.
All right. Well, the way
Not that I
that
use
this
that
thing
either.
works is that talk, start talking about it. And let's see if it's that interesting.
It's interesting in that, again, Facebook is trying to get ahead of the game. They're saying, okay, there's this thing. We think it may be interesting. We're going to throw a lot of money at it and try and let them operate independently. And the fact that they have two examples of people that they've made that deal with makes it credible that they will let them operate. This is the third. Well, what else are you counting apart from Instagram and WhatsApp?
Friend feed.
Well, kind of.
It's running.
Hey, that was kind of an acqui-hire. They got a CTO out of it who's now gone off to do Quip. So that was, I don't think that was that wasn't in the same basket at all. But even though we still use it,
WhatsApp is. Oh, you said that? Okay.
Yeah, no. WhatsApp. I mean, doing the deal with WhatsApp showed that they would give them some autonomy because the WhatsApp guy has been speaking autonomously. So I think it's then plausible that they would.
Instagram showed that, and
Instagram
that's
showed
what
to some
convinced
extent,
the WhatsApp guy that he could do this. Okay. So your point. What about Oculus Rift? Do we need a? What was that guy's name that had the visor on Star Trek Next Generation? Data?
Geordi,
right.
Geordi.
Do we need to all be fitted with Geordi helmets?
No, we can just do this. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Which would you rather do? $100 a year for a helmet or Office 365?
No, I think that if there's anything that's better than people wanting to wear those awful 3D glasses on their head to watch TV, it will be that we're all going to want to wear really big giant things on our head that are even larger.
That also vibrates.
It's going to be transformative. Everyone's going to be wearing them. Everyone's going to be wearing them.
Mark bought this because it doesn't fit the pattern. I don't see what it's going to be used for at Facebook. But a friend of mine and I were talking about it, and he says, you're thinking about it wrong. Facebook is losing employees to Google because Google has this kind of HR pitch, right? Oh, we are building self-driving cars here. You get free food. We have Google Glass here. We have Vint Cerf here in the hallway, and on and on. And the fact that Google is aspirational and building stuff that's for the long future, like pills you're going to eat and stuff like that, is very attractive to developers. They want to work on big things like that, and Facebook has not had that pitch. So now, if Zuckerberg has a new Facebook X lab that's being built with some of these newer purchases, that's going to be the HR pitch to you. Hey, you can work with the guy who built XYZ cool video game, and you can be working with the Oculus Rift guys building a new platform, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how they're going to fight the Google, R&D lab, the Google X R&D lab in these HR pitches. And from that standpoint, I sort of get it, but I'm struggling with this one. I usually understand what Zuckerberg's doing, but this one I just didn't make sense to me.
So, Danny, do you care about Oculus Rift?
Well, it's funny, when the news came up, I posted an infographic I did 20 years ago, which is all about virtual reality and how we're going to have all these things and it's going to change everything. And
where's my flying car, basically?
Well, it was 20 years ago, and it really struck for me too, because I'm here in Orange County, and that's where Oculus Rift is based. And we did the graphic 20 years ago because companies in Orange County were doing all this VR stuff. So, I was ready for it 20 years ago. Maybe now the time has come. But I tend to be more dubious. I think it's interesting. I've never used it. Okay, so maybe it would blow me away. But then the stuff that 20 years ago we saw was blowing everybody as well. Sorry, I said okay, and now Google's trying to do a certain. Yeah, shut up. I said okay, and then
you're getting Google nowed.
I must have said Google as well, and then it just went nuts.
Oh, you said okay. The match
I
is the
said
wrong
okay,
word.
then Google, and then it kicked off the browser for some reason. So
What? Do you have one of
Yeah.
those things on your head?
the browser's listening. So if I say okay, Google, and I'm on a Google page or something, and I must have had a blank tab. So I said okay, okay
Danny,
Google,
keep
and
in
then
mind,
it launched off.
I'm not struggling to get what Oculus Rift is. In
Right,
fact,
right.
at South by Southwest at the Microsoft party, they were using Oculus
Right.
Rift to demonstrate how cool they were, and it was the hottest thing, the hottest display in that whole party.
What is it? What does it have to do?
It is a very interesting technology, and it's fun to play with, and it's fun to talk to video game people about the future. I just didn't get why Facebook was buying them.
I like your argument that this gives Mark something cool for the kids at Facebook. Actually, if you think about it, it was also relatively cheap. If I recall, they didn't pay $2 billion for it. They paid, if I remember, like $480 million for it, right? And then there was a lot
the
of
rest in
Facebook stock.
stock.
Well,
Yeah.
we got lots of stock, so here you go nuts, right? So actually, that's kind of cheap if you think about it in terms of we're just going to give you some stock or whatever, especially if the stock goes up just because they went ahead and put in the money, to get it. There's probably a little bit of value of denying Google getting it because you can imagine Google's probably interested. So, if they're interested and we take it away from them, why not? And maybe, they'll find some kind of an application down the line. So maybe he figures, yeah, this is worth our rocket bet for the future as well.
Yeah, it's called
But
Gang.
yeah, I think you're right. I'm not expecting that in 12 months we're going to suddenly be, Facebook for your face as the oatmeal comic had. That was great. If you hadn't seen it, he did this about a year ago. He talked about Facebook for your face when you're too tired and you can't get off the couch. You just need to have.
Well,
it
all
strapped.
these face technologies, Robert, seem to have been overpromised and underdelivered.
It takes time. The Meta is another one where they have two 720p screens here and a front-facing 3D sensor, and it just takes it needs a few more flips of Moore's law to make that a product that really is viable for the mass market. So that's probably 4 years. The CEO says no, it's going to happen in the next year, and I think that's a little bit aggressive. I said in the chat room that Meta has a lot of execution risk. It's a great idea and it's cooking pretty well, but it's a long way from being a $500 product that the average gamer is going to go, man, this is cool. And Oculus Rift doesn't even try to overlay virtuality on the real world. It's completely black around you, and so you're completely in a virtual world. And so I can see that's going to happen earlier than Meta, but yeah, it's not ready for this year. Either is Google Glass. I've really started changing my belief about how likely Google Glass is going to be a real product this year.
That would be my point. So, John Taschek, what do you think? Oculus Rift, do we care?
I don't know. Do we care? Yes, I think we'll look back at this time in a few years and make judgments that say we cared. Whether it works out or not is irrelevant.
So it's
we'll
just
be saying,
the-
oh yeah, I remember that they bought that company for $2 billion, and
How cheap?
I think that it will be more pervasive in the way we work.
$2 billion in 2014 terms.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. It's like, hey, that company bought that company, but do we care? IBM bought Lotus. Did we care? We cared. Did it matter? No.
Yeah, IBM buying Lotus didn't matter?
No.
Okay. So, what matters right now that we're not talking about?
Are you asking me? How
Well,
about the Twitter? Did you do the
I've
Twitter,
been told that we don't
and
care
the video
about.
streaming thing that I kind of saw but didn't read.
What was that?
Twitter's launching some kind of new music service, maybe a video service or something, after the other one was kind of put to death. It just came out yesterday. I just kind of glanced at it. I figured I'd hear more about it on the show today. I think that was
I
interesting.
couldn't
It
invest
was
any more
basically
time.
tying Twitter as the second screen, but being more of primarily a first screen on TV. And as a person who's only watched TV maybe once in the last, since the football season, that's it. That's about it.
Well, you're not watching TV in real time. You're watching Netflix and other kinds of. I mean, that's something interesting that happened yesterday. Was the announcement by Amazon, or I don't know if it was an announcement,
the free,
more of a denial.
Free videos, right?
Yeah.
Well, there was denial as well.
Yeah, but the denial was that it was one of these. We did not say specifically, quote, this. It's pretty clear that they're trying to drive everybody toward Prime, and that some sort of division between cash and advertising support is going to stick to the wall.
Yeah, like the subsidized Kindle is one of those versions, and the one that has ads.
They're coming out with a device any day now, right, Danny?
There was the rumors that they're going to have a TV thing that'll be like the Roku.
Right.
So, which makes sense. I could see that happening.
Okay. All right, Kevin. Anything else that we're missing?
Well, the other thing that's interesting was how much backlash there was against Facebook buying it from the gamer types who want this and want this to happen, and are very suspicious of Facebook over it. And I think that's partly because
that was more of a Kickstarter anguish, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't Kickstarter anguish. It was Facebook they were angry with, and they were basically. I think the worry is that the people who funded this were very hardcore console gamer types who like to spend hours on end in another world. I think this would help them do that more. And Facebook represents the antithesis of that in gaming, in that it brought the rise of Farmville and Zynga and all these light, continuous social games that has taken over a lot of development in gaming, and I think it's the sort of the cultural clashes within the gaming world that caused a lot of that backlash, because they see Facebook as exactly the opposite of what they wanted. And
anybody there?
And similarly with mobile gaming, they also see that as a sort of toxic threat to real gaming, because real gaming involves committing yourself to it for hours on end, not just like poking at your phone every now and then.
Well, you had Notch from Minecraft. Say not doing that.
Yeah.
And pull it out completely, and that wasn't a very positive thing for Facebook to come off of it.
Right. Yes. No. Quite.
We're in the land of what's that? Oh, I think John just hung up.
Oh.
Okay. Once around the table, and we'll get out of here. Starting with Robert Scoble.
There we go. Sorry. To wrap up, Microsoft, big win for their existing customer base that has not left them. But they probably don't care, because they probably don't. Most of those people, I just don't see in the modern world. Facebook, nice R&D lab beginnings.
Danny Sullivan.
My takeaway is that Office for iPad was really Office for the cloud, and it's another step towards getting people to shift towards having their data stored with Microsoft rather than their money stored with Microsoft on a yearly basis when they buy software.
So do you think that Microsoft's going to be successful at getting us slowly but surely with the current offerings into a subscription model?
Yeah.
I
think there are times people need to have software, and I think that when you start talking about businesses, they don't care. I think a lot of businesses are not sitting around going, well, I could get it for free. No, it's $10. I think it's easier to continue, first of all, to pay to keep having what you've had before and not mess with it until you get to the time. I mean, there's a long terminal velocity for Microsoft to fall, if that makes sense.
Kevin Marks.
I'm waiting to hear about Microsoft Office for Oculus Rift. I think that's the next thing we need to look up.
All right. Well, I have seen no indication of why I should turn on the full apps. So I'm sort of stuck now trying to understand whether or not I should free up the hard drive space on my iPad or not. And I'm getting the message that they're not going to go to a freemium model. They're going to go to a bait and switch model, as somebody in the chat room suggested.
Yeah.
Well, they already have they don't even have a freemium model. They already have a free model. You can go.
Well,
use
that's your
Office
web
online.
page. That's your web page scenario. But
Yeah, but
if that was the case, then we would have been doing that, or all the legions of people who still think that that their companies are seeding them with Excel and PowerPoint are going to continue to do that.
Well, no, I mean that's not a solution for big enterprises. But I guess I don't know what the disguise of a freemium model is. They have a paid model. They make no secret of charging you for the software, right? There's no bait and switch. It's like, you want to use the software? Here's how much it costs. It's confusing how much it costs, but that.
Yeah, but if you add all that up, Danny,
it's not like when you're with Google where they give you something for free and then you're wondering, are they going to try to charge you for this later on? Microsoft hasn't given this stuff for free,
right? And Google has been
relatively recently.
Google's been quite successful with what they do, and I don't know that Microsoft is going to be successful at what they're doing here. I think that they're going to deliver some functionality, and they're going to give Satya some talking points with which he can start doing things that are more important to them, such as getting into notifications and things like that, which they're woefully clueless about. But unfortunately for them, they're not using the iPad as a launch platform for that sensibility. And once they do, then they're going to be reversing the tailspin. Whether they can pull out of the death dive or not is going to be something that we'll figure out. They got a lot of money and they've got a lot of smart people. If they were actually working towards something, it would, I think, boost the stock price more than it already has been. I think the upside right now is something like, I don't know, I don't get into stock prices, but all right. I want to thank Salesforce.com for its support for this show. I want to thank Rob Legess for making sure that this show came back to the air, and Rackspace for supporting him in that period of time. I want to thank vociferously NewTek and their TriCaster. We've been having some issues that we're going to try and sort out, but it's not it's operator error, I'm sure, and I don't mean that by that Tina. I want to thank our producer and director, Tina Chase Gillmor, without which we would not be here today. And Tina's been developing another show, which I'll let her talk about at some point in the near future, that's already done one dress rehearsal, and we're thinking about releasing that secretly on the Microsoft notification networks where it doesn't exist. But look for that in the near future. And I want to thank the gangsters today, starting with Kevin Marks. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
I want to thank Danny Sullivan. It's good to have you back. Hope you come more frequently.
Yeah. Starting to ease off this year. The beginning of the year is always terrible.
Yeah, well, you're just getting way too successful with your conference and your business.
No, it's just they all stack up at the beginning of the year, and then you get past overtime, and suddenly everything spreads out. So.
Very good. And, of course, the infamous Robert Scoble, without which we wouldn't have Robert Scoble.
Thanks, man. Thanks. It's always fun.
Happy birthday to your mother-in-law?
No, your mother-in-law.
Oh, my mother-in-law. Oh, happy birthday to my mother-in-law. Bong. I did that really well. Thanks to John Taschek. We lost him there at the end. I think he ran out of battery power or something. But thanks to Verizon for supporting him, and no thanks to Comcast for not. We'll see you again next time. Thanks to the chat room. Thanks to everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.